Welcome to The Bitter Witness.
Don't be scared.
Hello. Welcome back. I hope you've had a good week. The weather was beautiful here in my corner of Ontario, Canada. We actually reached +7 Celsius this week, which is unheard of for this time of year. And then the snow started today, and everything is as it should be again in the world. We've run into some microphone issues here at The Bitter Witness this week as well, which is why this episode is a little late getting published. So, if you enjoy the show, please go to our Patreon page as we are in desperate need of new microphones. Just visit The Bitter Witness at Patreon. You'll have access to exclusive content called The Bitter Bits, which are smaller episodes, shorter stories, or maybe sometimes I'll just vent about a story. So, the dogs are sleeping behind me. Miley will, of course, be providing ASMR for us in the background with her wonderfully peaceful snoring. So grab a cup of tea, sit back, and relax while I tell you about the case of the murder of Reena Virk. This week's case is a case that really upset me back in 1997 when it happened, and after doing all the research for this case, I've discovered it still upsets me to this day. Conducting the research for this case was quite difficult, not as in the information was difficult to locate, but difficult in the sense that the details are relatable to those of us who have lived through being a teenager, and they are also gut-wrenching. As well, there were so many opportunities to help Reena. So many fucking opportunities, and not one person stepped forward and did anything substantial for this girl. So, with that said, trigger warning, this case discusses murder, bullying, and assault. As always, I want to give the victims top billing in this case. So, Reena, I acknowledge you, and I send my love to you wherever you may be. When I was researching this case, I realized there are two main components to Reena's life. The first is her family. The second are her peers. So we're going to begin looking at Reena's family life, and then we'll look at the life she had with her peers. Reena Virk was the oldest child of 3. Her parents are Manjit and Suman Virk. The family was of Punjabi descent. Manjit was born in India and Suman was born in Canada. Suman's family had converted from Hinduism to Christianity. They were members of the Jehovah's Witness faith. In 1994, the family moved to a home in Saanich West, which is an area that is about 7 minutes from Victoria, BC, located on Vancouver Island. Reena was 11. In July of 1996, Reena met a group of teens at a local park. They were accepting of Reena and invited her to hang out with them. That evening, Reena was a little later getting home than what she and her parents had agreed on. And when Reena's parents asked why she had missed her curfew for the night, Reena explained about meeting the teens at the park, and she told her parents that the teens were smoking and that she had a lot of fun just hanging out with them. Her parents instructed her to stay away from those teens and pulled out a Bible and reminded Reena what the scripture said about smoking and defying parental rules. I'm sure that went over like a screen door on a submarine. The next night, Reena went back to the park. She met up with the same group of teens, and when she got home, her parents grounded her to her room. According to her father, Manjit, they grounded her to do some thinking. Listen, I know how hard it is to raise children firsthand. I also know how insane it can be to raise teenagers. Not only because I've done it, but because I used to be one. And the absolute worst thing you can do is ignore a problem like this and just simply expect a young teenager to do something because you said so. Reena had always had issues with her identity. She was a bigger girl, and because of the societal norms that we have all felt the pressure of at one point or another, Reena felt she was ugly. She didn't have friends. She was now 13 and she was lonely. She was also having a difficult time with the rules of her family's home and the strictness of the Jehovah's Witness faith. Reena was already feeling deflated, rejected, and she was desperately seeking acceptance by someone. And I feel that by her parents doing this, it was just another form of rejection to Reena. She had struggled with her identity throughout the years, but Reena continued seeing the teens from the park, and one night in July of 1996, she went to one of their homes to stay the night. While she was there, this girl and her sister informed Reena that if she didn't like the rules and the groundings at home, all she had to do was tell the police that her parents were abusing her, and she would be put into foster care, and boom, no rules at all. These two girls made foster care sound like an absolute perfect utopia for Reena. No rules, no groundings, and she would have all the freedom she wanted to go out and find herself. Now, a nice utopia like that with no rules, no adults, being allowed to do what you want. We've all read Lord of the Flies, right? That didn't turn out so well for the boys. Reena went to the mother of these two girls and told her that her parents were abusing her. That mother took Reena to the police station to report the abuse. The police were sent to Reena's home, and they informed Manjeet, her father, and Suman, her mother, of the allegations that Reena had made, but they told them there would be no charges because there was not enough evidence. However, they also told them that Reena would be placed in foster care for the time being until the Children's Aid Society could investigate Reena's claims. Because Reena's parents had no experience or knowledge of the workings of the CAS, which is what we call the Children's Aid Society here, they were horrified that their daughter was being taken away. So they made an agreement with the CAS to have Reena stay with her maternal grandparents so that she wouldn't be exposed to the lifestyle of a foster home. Now, this is a quote from Manjeet's book regarding the specific allegations. Remember, this is Reena's father. Quote, I felt betrayed by my own daughter. From our point of view, Reena's reason for leaving home was simply because she wanted freedom from our house rules. Unquote. I have a few issues with this statement. I understand feeling betrayed. I do. But if your daughter is acting out in this way, there is something going on. Might not be physical abuse. Might not be abuse on the part of the parents at all. Might not be inside their home. But something is happening with her, and as her parents, you are obligated to find out what is happening or try and get her the help that she's needing. A counselor that you pay for might have helped Reena. God, even a big brother or a big sister could have mentored her. Staying at her grandparents' house didn't work out that well for Reena. The same issues were coming up regarding her wanting some freedom, and her grandparents were not willing to give it. Reena told her grandparents that her parents were abusive towards her and that they didn't love her. When Manjeet and Suman went to Suman's parents to discuss the situation with them and bring Reena home, Suman's parents refused to send her back because they believed Reena. This is another quote from Manjeet's book regarding this. Quote, I now think that Reena manipulated social workers and family alike. Her parents became the common enemy for all parties. She took advantage of the soft spot in her granny's heart. It was killing me that no one believed us and everyone seemed to accept Reena's stories. Unquote. In December of 1996, Reena also told her grandparents that she had been sexually abused by a family member, but refused to disclose the name of the person who did it to her. And she told her grandparents also that when she was younger, she had been abused during a family vacation to India. I'm going to read you another quote from Manjeet's book about these allegations. Specifically, quote, I think she, meaning Reena, created this web of deceit to confuse everyone and cause people to feel sorry for her, unquote. Eventually, Reena told her grandparents that it had in fact been her father that sexually abused her. From December 1996 until March of 97, Reena is still living at her grandparents' home, but she is speaking with her mother by phone. At this point, her father is refusing to speak with her and states that he's not allowed to because of a no contact order in place because of Reena's allegations of sexual abuse. Manjeet had been arrested and charged with the sexual abuse of his daughter. During March of 1997, Reena attempted to commit suicide. She was then admitted to a hospital, but she was deemed to be at low risk of attempting suicide again, so they released her. In May of 1997, Reena asked to be removed from her grandparents' home and placed in a foster home. The foster home that she was sent to, according to some reports, was quite an eye-opener for Reena. While in this foster home, Reena had to perform chores within the house, laundry, cooking, etc. In August of 1997, Manjeet is told that the charges of sexual abuse towards Reena are being stayed, not dropped, but just put on hold for a while. Then one night in September of 1997, Reena was late getting back to the foster home. When she arrived, she informed the foster mother that she had been assaulted while walking home. The foster mother reported the incident to the authorities. However, Reena was not believed. Both the foster mother and the police felt that Reena was lying because she was late for curfew. Shortly after the incident with the curfew, Reena went to her parents' home and spoke with her mother, asking if she could return home. When Manjeet, her father, returned home that evening and found that Reena was in the house, he went directly to his bedroom and refused to see or speak to her. Finally, Suman convinced him to come down to the family room and speak with Reena. When he sat down to speak with Reena, Reena apologized to her father and asked if she could come live at home again. Manjeet told Reena that he didn't want any more trouble with the law. Now, he states in his book that Reena offered to write a letter to the police stating that she was lying about the sexual abuse allegations. Personally, I take that with a grain of salt. I think that at the very least, the idea of an exoneration letter was most likely thrown out into the air by either or both Manjeet or Suman. And I believe, and this is just my opinion, that Reena agreed to do it because she knew that was the only way she would be able to come home to her family. So Reena wrote the letter right there in the family room that night. She handed the letter to her father, and as soon as Manjeet had the letter in his hand, he got up, left the family room, and called the lead officer on the case and told him that he had a letter exonerating him from Reena and that he wanted the charges off of his record completely. The next day, the officer came to the house and spoke with Reena privately. He left, convinced that Reena had written the letter and was now telling the truth. Reena returned to living at home with her family. However, on October 23, 1997, after things had been escalating between Reena and her parents, she informed her parents that she wanted to return to foster care. They didn't think that that would be possible because now the case had been closed. But Reena went to a youth shelter and called her social worker and told them that she's not happy at home anymore. Reena stayed at the youth shelter for 3 days. While at the shelter, Reena met up with 2 girls, Nicole Cook and Missy Pleich. Now, Reena had known Missy back in grade 6, but the two weren't really friends. They're just acquaintances, really. Nicole and Missy were 2 very street and system-wise girls. They'd been in and out of the system for a while, so they knew all the ins and outs. They also told Reena that they were members of a gang called the Shoreline Six. This was a gang of girls, and all the girls in this gang were tough. They drank, stayed out all night, and partied. They smoked. And I believe that Reena was enthralled by all the stories that the two girls told her of gang life. The most highlighted thing being the freedom that Reena was craving so desperately. Reena, still desperate for acceptance from anyone, began hanging out with these two. Reena started talking tough and telling people she was part of the Crips gang, wearing the same style clothes as Nicole and Missy, baggy coats, baggy jeans, wearing the same kind of makeup as the girls. But Nicole and Missy, instead of just ignoring Reena because they didn't want to be friends with her, they pretend to be her friend, but really they just want what Reena can give them. Money, smokes, makeup. These two took everything that they could get from Reena. As well, they were bullying her relentlessly. Reena was trying to take it in stride, laughing along with the two girls when they insulted her, but it wasn't right. While Reena was in the youth shelter, her social worker was looking for a foster home, but they were having trouble finding one that would take her. The social worker asked Manjeet and Suman if Reena could come home for a week or so, just until they found a place for her. Manjeet and Suman agreed. They stated that they agreed because they hoped that by coming home, Reena would decide to stay. On October 31st, Reena's parents and one of her siblings went out shopping. Reena had decided not to go, instead staying home alone. When her parents left, Nicole showed up at the house with a bunch of other friends. According to Reena, she was out on the deck of the house with Nicole and some of the friends having cigarettes, and unbeknownst to Reena, the rest of the friends were inside the house, stealing as much as they could get their hands on. Around the first week of November, Reena went to stay at one of her friends' homes for the night. The next morning, she came home. When she walked into the house, she was shivering and only wearing a t-shirt. According to Reena, Missy had been at the sleepover and had taken Reena's Club Monaco hoodie that her parents had given her as a gift and refused to give it back to her. On November 3rd, Manjeet went looking for his camcorder and found it missing. It was then that the family realized they had been robbed, including some of Suman's jewelry and some cash. After the theft at the family home, according to Manjeet, Reena began acting deplorably, smoking, staying out late, stating that she was part of a gang. This wasn't any different than how Reena had been acting before, but this time she was doing it in front of her parents. During the first week of November of 1997, Reena and her parents attended a meeting with her social worker, and Reena was placed in a foster home. As well, sometime during this week, Manjeet receives a letter from the police clearing him of all charges of the sexual abuse allegation. Can we just stop for a second here? We aren't even at the murder of this little girl, this 14-year-old girl. And I think we need to recognize the trauma that she and her family have been going through in and out of foster care, which in Canada is an absolutely broken system in the first place. We've had allegations of abuse, sexual, emotional, and physical. We've had bullying from both parents and peers towards Reena. My God, all she wanted was to find where she belonged. I can't imagine how hard it must have been for Reena to feel as though she didn't belong anywhere. Now we come to November 14th, 1997. Reena is in foster care, and she comes home to her parents' house for an overnight visit. Their plan was to attempt to have a family night, maybe try and begin to repair the relationships between them. During the visit, Reena told her parents that she had heard a rumor at school that a girl was going to be beaten up that night. She didn't know who it was, only that it was supposed to be happening that night. Later, Reena received a call from Nicole. Nicole asked if Reena wanted to meet with a bunch of friends and just hang out. Now, in his book, Manjeet states that he was listening to Reena's side of this conversation while she was on the phone with Nicole. He states in the book that Reena asked Nicole to put Missy on the phone, and when Missy got on the phone, Reena asked Missy if they were going to kick her butt. Apparently, Missy assured Reena that that was not the plan for the night. They were just going to drink, have some weed, and hang out. Once Reena got off the phone, she told her parents that she was going out for a get-together with some friends and she would be back later. Okay, I have to stop here for a second. I just have to say, if I heard my teenager asking someone on the phone seriously if they were going to kick their butt, there is no way that teenager would be leaving my home without a knockdown, drag-out fight from me. And if they did manage to get out, you can believe that I would be in the car and out looking for them as long as it took to find them, or at the very least, calling the police and telling them that I was worried for my child's safety and what I had heard on the phone. This child was 14. According to court documents, Reena met with Nicole and Missy in front of Walmart, which was within walking distance from Reena's house. This was about 8 o'clock. From there, the three girls took a bus to Shoreline Secondary School. There, they met up with about 20 or 30 other teens, as the schoolyard was a popular place to hang out, drink, party, and basically cause shit. There's a huge field behind this school, so it's a great place to hang out in the dark, as you most likely won't be seen by cops or adults. While the kids are at the school, someone broke a window. With that, the police came and told the kids to leave. I have to say, a bunch of underage kids drinking, smoking weed, and destroying property late at night, and the police tell them to move along. Take your party somewhere else so we don't have to deal with it? Really? Just take them home. From the school, Reena, Nicole, and Missy walked to a Max variety store, about a 5-minute walk. Nicole and Missy convince Reena to go in and buy smokes for them. At approximately 9 p.m., Reena goes into the variety store and buys the smokes for Nicole and Missy, and then she uses the payphone and calls home. Her brother answers the phone, and Reena tells him that she'll be coming home by 10 because the get-together is over now. But once Reena has finished the call, Nicole and Missy link their arms with Reena and tell her that the party has now moved to the Craigflower Bridge, which is about a 7-minute walk from the variety store. According to court documents, Reena didn't want to go, but Nicole and Missy ripped up her bus pass and told her that it would be fun, and reluctantly Reena went with them. Once at the bridge, there were several teenagers underneath, drinking, smoking cigarettes and weed, and just basically hanging out. So let's take a moment and introduce who all is under the bridge. First off, we have Reena, 14 years old. Then we have Warren Glowatsky. He's 16. He's a friend of the girls and a wannabe gangster, but he doesn't know Reena. Glowatsky's mother was an alcoholic and had left the family. His father had moved to Las Vegas to marry a woman he had met in a casino there. Glowatsky was left alone in BC to look after himself. So, a young 16-year-old boy, absolutely no supervision, no boundaries, no guidance at all, and he was fascinated with the romanticism of gangster life and wanted to become a member of a gang. Glowatsky's friend, only known as LL, and we don't know LL's age, but I would assume he's approximately 16 years old. LL doesn't know Reena at all. He's just there hanging out with Glowatsky, drinking, smoking. Next, we have Kelly Ellard, who is 15, and she is the best friend of Nicole Cook. Nicole Cook is 14. We have Missy Pleisch, who is also 14. We then have Courtney Keith, Nicole Patterson, and Gail Ooms. These girls are the girls that make up the gang of the Shoreline Six. So, according to Nicole Cook, she had left her phone book at Reena's house, and Reena had called people who were listed inside the phone book and said things about Nicole. Stupid things like her boobs were fake, her eyes were colored lenses, and Nicole had AIDS. Just absolute teenage crap. Nothing serious, nothing that would have dramatically impacted Nicole's life, but it pissed Nicole off. As well, Missy claimed that Reena had slept with her boyfriend, and Missy was very upset about it. Missy claims that she confronted Reena about it and that the two girls had gotten into a heated yelling match. Prior to this night, unbeknownst to Reena, Nicole, who was still angry about the phone calls that Reena had made, went to her best friend, Kelly Ellard, and the two devised a plan to get back at Reena for what she had done to Nicole. They decided they were going to beat her up. Missy agreed to help lure Reena out that night because Missy was still pissed off that Reena had slept with her boyfriend. Nicole's mother testified that she overheard Nicole talking with a friend about digging a grave and burying her alive right before Reena's murder. Naturally, Nicole denies this allegation. Through a combination of books written about this case, articles written about this case, court documents, and a documentary produced by MSNBC, I think I have managed to piece together almost everything that happened that night under that bridge. So LL, Glowatsky's friend, claims that Reena came down and was sitting against a rock wall under the bridge, approximately 5 feet in front of him, and that there were two groups of girls. One of the groups of girls was standing directly in front of Reena. A few minutes after Reena arrived, Nicole began screaming at Reena, stating that Reena had stolen and read her phone book and then phoned people that were friends of Nicole's, and specifically that Reena had phoned a boy that Nicole liked. Nicole then proceeded to take a lit cigarette and smushed it out in the center of Reena's forehead. Reena screamed in pain and began to run towards the steps that would lead back up to the road to get away from the group of girls. Reena made it about 4 or 5 steps up, and Kelly Ellard appeared and stood in Reena's way. At that point, about 4 or 5 of the girls swarmed Reena and began punching and kicking her. Reena was up against the railing and had no way to get out. LL claimed that he and Glowatsky ran to the top of the hill. However, once he reached the top of the hill and looked back, he realized that Glowatsky had not run to the top of the hill, but instead was down kicking Reena in the head several times. He stated that by this point Reena was bent over the railing, facing the side where Glowatsky was. So now, there are several girls on one side beating Reena viciously, and Glowatsky on the other side of the railing, kicking her in the head. LL stated that he ran back down the hill and pulled Glowatsky away from Reena and yelled at the girls to stop and leave her alone. LL stated that several of the girls backed away, but Kelly Ellard and Nicole Cook dragged Reena back down to the water and threw her in the mud. Reena pulled herself back to the rock wall and managed to sit up and lean against the wall. At this time, Kelly Ellard began kneeing Reena in the stomach and punching her with uppercuts to the chin repeatedly. At the same time, Nicole Cook took matches out of Reena's purse and tried to light Reena's hair on fire, but luckily Reena's hair wouldn't ignite. At this point, another one of the girls that had been in on the initial beating stepped in and told Ellard and Cook to stop and that Reena had had enough. The girl had to push Ellard back to get her to stop hitting Reena, but eventually they stopped and allowed Reena to stagger up the stairs to the road above. LL stated that when he looked at Reena as she passed him, heading up to the road, her eyes were almost swollen shut, her nose was bleeding, she had deep gashes on her face that were also bleeding, and he could see the burn on her forehead from Cook's cigarette. Reena made it to the road and began to cross the Craigflower Bridge. She was in horrible shape and moving extremely slow. She was gripping onto the railing of the bridge to keep her upright and to help pull herself forward. This just shows the strength of Reena Virk. To have all these horrific things done to her and to still be able to walk, unreal. The time is now about 10:30 p.m. The majority of the group of teenagers have now scattered from the area. Missy and Nicole have to be back at the group home for an 11 p.m. curfew, so the two girls who lured Reena out that night, jumped on a bus and headed back to the group home, leaving Reena behind. Missy stated in an MSNBC documentary that she and Nicole didn't speak about the beating or Reena on the ride back to the group home. Missy states that she and Nicole didn't speak the entire ride home. Missy states that at that point in her life, she was really good at shutting down her feelings, and that she didn't even think about seeing Reena staggering across the bridge, bloodied and beaten. According to testimony, at this point in Nicole's life, her only goal was to become a hitman for the mob or a member of a gang in New York or LA. So for her to not even have an iota of remorse at the sight of what she had done doesn't shock me. As well, she wouldn't want anyone to know that she had any feelings about anything, would she? But Ellard and Glowatsky did not scatter like the other teens. Ellard had decided that she wanted to make sure that Reena didn't rat them out about the beating. So she grabbed Glowatsky and headed towards Reena, who was still stumbling along the bridge. They each took one of Reena's arms and led her off the bridge and back down to the water. Once down by the water, Ellard told Reena to take off her shoes. Reena complied. Once Reena had removed her shoes, they again began to savagely beat her. Glowatsky has admitted to slamming Reena's head into a tree. Reena fell to the ground, but that wasn't enough for Ellard and Glowatsky. They began jumping and stomping on Reena's chest, kicking her, and continued to punch her even after she was unconscious. After beating and jumping on Reena for a few more minutes, these two pieces of shit dragged Reena's body towards the water. As they were dragging Reena through the muck along the bank, Reena's pants came off, and Ellard actually took the time to make a joke about Reena's body hair. Glowatsky stated that he let go of Reena because he saw a police car drive over the bridge, and that while he was looking at the police car go by, Ellard continued dragging Reena's body into the water. Once she had Reena in the water, she karate chopped Reena's throat, and then Ellard placed her foot on Reena's head and smoked a cigarette while she held Reena's head under the water. Once Ellard was satisfied that Reena was dead, she and Glowatsky stood on the banks and watched Reena's body begin to float away in the water. This 14-year-old smoked a cigarette while she was killing Reena. Now, before we go any further, I personally don't for 1 second believe that Glowatsky let go of Reena and that Ellard got Reena into the water all by herself. Reena was 5'6" to 5'8" and weighed about 170 to 180 pounds. Ellard was a lot smaller than Reena. There is no way she dragged Reena's unconscious body into the water by herself. I seriously doubt that Ellard would have even been able to move Reena's body. I believe, and it's again just my opinion, but I believe that Glowatsky helped drag Reena all the way to and into the water. When Reena didn't come home that night, Manjeet and Suman called the police to report their daughter as missing. They were told to hold off on filing the report because she probably just went up country to party, and she'll be back in a couple days. That's usually what things like this are. Suman even called Nicole and Missy the next day, asking the two girls if they knew where Reena was. Both girls told Suman they had no idea where Reena was. I'm sorry, but I have to say something. When are the police going to start taking people fucking seriously when they call to report their child missing? I know there's paperwork that goes along with a missing persons report, but you know what? I would rather you go out and look for the kid and find them safe and sound and then sit and do your paperwork for an hour instead of avoiding it altogether. To both the police officer who answered the phone that morning and to all the other police officers who even for a millisecond think of telling a parent to wait to file a missing persons report for their child, just do your job. If it's the avoidance of paperwork that you're after, then go work somewhere where there is no paperwork. Oh, wait, every job has some type of paperwork. You know, I pray to God that if a loved one of yours ever goes missing, that the police officer that answers the phone is a better officer than you were to the Virks. November 15th, 1997, which is the morning after Reena was murdered. According to Missy, Ellard called her and Nicole at the group home and stated that she had killed Reena and that Glowatsky had just sat there and watched and didn't help her. She was angry that Glowatsky hadn't helped her. Missy then states that the three girls, Ellard, Nicole, and Missy, met at the water's edge where Ellard and Glowatsky had murdered Reena. According to Missy, Ellard informed her and Nicole that they had to look around and see if they could find any of Reena's stuff. Missy states that they found Reena's shoes and Nicole put them in her bag, and the three girls just kept on walking like nothing had happened. According to Nicole, she states that she had no idea that Ellard had killed Reena, and that the next morning was just a typical Saturday morning. In her interview with MSNBC, Nicole first states, "To my knowledge, Kelly never took part in the murder, so it wasn't like the morning after a murder and we're all hanging out and acting like nothing happened, because to me, nothing did happen," unquote. But when she's told that Missy claims that she had taken Reena's shoes and put them in her bag that morning, Nicole stated, quote, "I mean, that's a possible, but I don't remember a lot about that day," unquote. On November 16th, Manjeet and Suman called the police again and are now allowed to file a missing persons report for Reena. The police begin their investigation. Meanwhile, Monday morning at school, there are rumors flying rampantly that there has been a murder. The amazing thing that I find about this is that none of these kids told anyone, an adult, about the rumors. None of them seemed that upset about the fact that one of their classmates had been killed. Literally, life went on for everyone except for Reena. On November 21st at about 3 a.m., a police officer came to Manjeet and Suman's home and informed them that there were 2 fights at the bridge and that Reena went into the water and is presumed dead. The only thing the police really knew from eyewitnesses and the rumors at the school was that 3 people were seen crossing the Craigflower Bridge, but only 2 were seen coming back. That night, the police arrested Glowatsky, Ellard, Nicole Cook, Missy Pletch, Courtney Keith, Gail Ooms, and Nicole Patterson. According to Rebecca Godfrey, who researched and wrote the book about this case entitled Under the Bridge, when Nicole Cook is arrested, she isn't talking to the police. The only thing she did say was that she wanted to hire John Gotti's lawyer to defend her. According to Rebecca Godfrey, Nicole and Ellard had made a pact that neither one of them would talk if the police ever found out and questioned them. However, despite the pact, Ellard immediately started talking with police. Police began searching the water where Reena had been dragged in. First, they found Reena's pants and underwear near the place where Reena was murdered. According to court papers, Reena's jeans were still completely done up, which matches the statement that they had come off while Reena was being dragged to the water. On November 21st, 7 days exactly after Reena left her parents' home to go to a get-together with her friends, in the early afternoon, police find Reena's half-naked body about a kilometer away from where Kelly Ellard and Warren Glowatsky had murdered her. Now, I want to discuss Reena's autopsy findings. I'm going to tell you now, this is horrific, but I think it's important for all of us to hear. I want you to know the extent of the injuries that Reena suffered, because the one thing I don't want is for you to walk away after listening to this podcast and think that the beating that Reena took that night was a simple cat fight between teenagers. According to court documents, this is a list of the injuries found on Reena's body during the autopsy. Severe bruising to the face and to the back and sides of her head. This is consistent with at least 12 blows from kicks and punches. Reena's brain was significantly swollen. According to Dr. Gray, a pathologist, the head injuries alone were sufficient enough to be life-threatening to Reena. There was a mark on Reena's scalp that was consistent with a running shoe print. Reena also had severe internal injuries as a result of the blows, kicks, and stomps to her front and back torso area. Specifically, 3 or 4 blows to the front of her torso and 2 or 3 to the back of her torso. One of the blows to Reena's navel area was strong enough to tear the mesentery and crush the wall of her bowel. The mesentery is a membrane that attaches your intestines to the wall around your stomach and holds it in place. In fact, the pathologist, Dr. Gray, made a comparison for the court. He said that the force of the blows that Reena suffered were comparable to if she had been run over by a car. Another blow caused deep bruising to Reena's abdominal wall and some of her internal organs. Reena had significant bruising and swelling under both eyes. She had a mark on her forehead consistent with a cigarette burn. Cigarettes burn at approximately 1500 to 2200 Fahrenheit. Just for comparison, steel melts at 2200 Fahrenheit. Something that hot was held against Reena's forehead for God knows how long by Nicole Cook. Reena had bruising on her nose, bruising and swelling on her upper lip. Reena also had a laceration on her lower lip. There was bruising on her shoulder and clavicle area. Reena had stomp marks on the back of her left shoulder. As well, there were internal neck injuries that would have been caused by the stomping. Reena had parallel scratches across her right shoulder, consistent with someone running their nails down her shoulder. Reena had an inch-long bruise across her neck, just to the left of her Adam's apple. That was consistent with a chopping blow. Small pebbles, consistent with the bottom of the gorge where Reena was murdered, were found inside Reena's lungs, suggesting that Reena in fact was alive when Ellard placed her foot on Reena's head and held Reena under the water. In 1988, Glowatsky and Ellard were charged and convicted with second-degree murder. They both received life sentences with the possibility of parole after 7 years. According to Rebecca Godfrey, Glowatsky took advantage of the resources in prison and used them to try and better himself. He didn't join any gangs, he didn't do any drugs. In 2004, Ellard's conviction was overturned on appeal, and she was granted a second trial. Glowatsky decided to testify Ellard in the second trial, despite the prison culture of don't rat someone out or you're dead. During Ellard's second trial, she stated that she took part in the initial beating, but that was only in self-defense. During Glowatsky's testimony at the second trial, he started crying. At the same time, Ellard started weeping. According to Rebecca Godfrey, that was the first time that Ellard had ever shown any emotion at all throughout both of her trials. Ellard's second trial resulted in a mistrial, a hung jury. In 2005, Ellard started her third trial. During the third trial, prosecution called 10 witnesses that said Ellard had confessed to them to killing Reena. Ellard told the court that her peers in school were conspiring against her and trying to pin Reena's murder on her. However, that defense didn't work with the jury, and they found Ellard guilty, and she was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 7 years. The other 6 girls who beat Reena up under the bridge, including Nicole and Missy, were all charged with assault. They were all convicted and received sentences of up to 1 year. During her interview with MSNBC, Nicole Cook states that she was not responsible for Reena's death in any way, shape, or form. She states, "I wasn't there. I didn't kill her." When asked if she felt that Reena wouldn't have been murdered if the original fight had never happened, she answers, "I don't know." And then she shrugs her shoulders and continues saying, "Maybe not. Maybe." Nicole states with a sly smile, she didn't die as a result of that beating. When asked if she started it all, Nicole answers, "Some people would say that, yeah." Missy states in an interview that it was her fault. In between tears, she states, "Reena trusted me, and I made her come out that night. It was all my fault. 8 years after Reena's murder, Glowatsky admitted to his part in the murder and asked Reena's parents for forgiveness. The Virk stated in an interview that if he wants to change the course of his life for the better, then they needed to support him. And in 2007, with the full support of the Virks, Glowatsky was released on supervised parole for good behavior. In 2008, Ellard appealed her conviction again, and again the Court of Appeals overturned her conviction, stating that she had not received a fair trial because of unfair questioning by the prosecution. This opened the door for a fourth trial. However, the Supreme Court of Canada dismissed the verdict of the Court of Appeals and upheld Ellard's conviction. In 2009, after 12 years and 3 trials, Ellard finally started paying for her crime. Throughout her years in prison, Ellard was released to a halfway house but eventually sent back to prison as she was charged with assaulting a woman in a park while out on a pass from the halfway house. Ellard has given birth to 2 children, both as a result of conjugal visits with her ex-partner. And as recently as May of 2023, Ellard, who has now legally changed her name to Carrie Marie Sim, now 40 years old, was granted day parole with special conditions. These conditions are that she must immediately report any and all sexual and non-sexual relationships or friendships and any changes in these relationships to her parole officer. She must have no contact with her ex-partner and the father of her children without supervision or written permission granted by her parole officer. And she must follow psychiatric treatment to address anxiety and mental health issues. Let's discuss the many aspects to this case. So I'm going to read you a quote from Manjeet's book, and it's Manjeet describing the world in India that shaped him and his beliefs and the way he was raised and the way I believe that he was attempting to raise his family here in Canada. In the 1960s and 70s, the decades that shaped me, India was at least 20 years behind North America. The strong family offered security for all dwelling in it. A moral code controlled public interaction. I recall men and boys giving up their seats on public transport to accommodate women and girls. No profanity was tolerated. Respect for authority was taught at home and in schools. Children did not leave their parental homes at an early age, but moved out only after marriage. I just wanted to give you a little background on Manjeet so that you understand where he's coming from. And I don't deny at all that these parents, that this family, have suffered a horrible, horrific tragedy in losing their daughter. But I think it's important that we understand how he was raised and how, like I said, I believe he was attempting to raise his family. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with raising your family the way you want to and with the same morals and values and ideals that you were raised with. Something wrong occurs when you try to raise your family in such a way and you get blowback from one of your children because they've been exposed to another way, and you absolutely remain solid and don't allow any alterations to the way that the family works. Now, moving on a little bit, I will come back to Manjeet in a moment. There are many people who feel that this crime was motivated by racial bias or religious bias. And while that may be so, I don't agree. If you do agree with that, you can easily start your own podcast and discuss what you think on there. But since I do all the research and host this podcast, I'm going to tell you what I think. Reena was a lovely girl. She was beautiful and brilliant. However, as she was growing up, she started to feel as though there were things in life that she wanted, just as all teenagers do. She wanted more freedom. She wanted friends. She wanted acceptance. However, Being a teenager in a Jehovah Witness household is not an easy thing to navigate when you are faced every day with seeing the rest of the teenagers enjoying freedom and not under strict parental control. I personally have family members who were part of the witness faith. In fact, my uncle was an elder of that faith. And I remember seeing my cousins struggling to find themselves while under strict parental control. These situations never end well for the family unit. The parents don't understand why the kids aren't obeying them, and the kids don't understand why the parents won't let them explore the world and make decisions for themselves. There is another part of the Jehovah Witness faith that comes into play, although it's never been mentioned. With the Jehovah Witness faith, once a child decides to leave the faith or not practice that faith, they are shunned. They are excommunicated. It happened to my cousins. I've seen it firsthand. It is an awful, awful thing. Parents literally refuse to acknowledge their own children because they don't have or don't share the same faith as what the parents do. Reena was growing up with three worlds surrounding her: the world of the Jehovah Witness faith and its beliefs, the world of being from a predominantly Hindu-based family, and the world of teenage parties, cliques, teenage romance, and freedom. Can you imagine the confusion within Reena's mind? I can. And then you throw in some out-of-whack teenage hormones, and what you have, my friends, is a recipe for an atomic bomb. I personally have several issues with Manjeet's book. While I appreciate his honesty, and I am more than well aware that hindsight is 20/20, I also know that when you are going through drama like this, it is damn near impossible to step aside and make an informed decision in regards to your actions. If we are all to believe what Reena said, then his anger and venom found in his written word towards her should be expected, right? If we don't believe Reena, then we should feel that his anger and venom towards Reena is also expected. I think he has a right to have those feelings, whatever they may be and why they are coming forward. However, I don't think he needs to publicize them in print. Now let me tell you why. Because as I read his book, I got angrier and angrier to the point where I felt sick to my stomach for Reena. 90% of that book was about how bad he had it and all the awful things that Reena did to him. As I read it, I just thought, this doesn't sound like a father writing about his daughter who was going through it in her teenage years and then was viciously and callously murdered. The title of his book is Reena, A Father's Story, but that is not what this book is about. The book is about him and how he suffered dealing with the decisions that Reena, his daughter, a 14-year-old girl, made. After he spends several chapters discussing all the horribly deceitful things that Reena did to him, there is a chapter about Reena's murder. And then the rest of the book continues on about the people who killed his daughter, the trials, how the trials affected him, and forgiving one of the killers of his daughter. In chapter 14, prior to him listing the accomplishments and how wonderful his living children are, he discusses a baby bird skeleton, half in and half out of a nest that he felt had tried to fly before it should have, that he had found on his property. This is a quote from that section of Manjeet's book. Quote, "Obedience is vital for their survival. A new chick under the watchful eye of the parents does well to stay close to the nest until it is fully trained to fend for itself. I never imagined that one of my children would leave the nest prematurely and with such savage consequences." Unquote. I honestly don't know what it is that bothers me so much about this book and what he says in it. Maybe I feel this way because if it was my child and I wrote a book about them, I would make the book about them. I remember watching a video clip of Reena's funeral, and I wasn't able to find it again anywhere on the internet so that I could watch it again. But I remember this feeling of shock and disgust at the things that were being said during her service by her father and the officiants. They were discussing the lies that Reena had told and the hurt and the shame that she had brought to her family. Now listen, I know better than anyone that when a person dies, it doesn't make them a good person just because they died. If they were an ass in life, they're still an ass in death. But we are talking about a 14-year-old girl here, a confused, relentlessly bullied, desperate to fit in, craving attention and acceptance 14-year-old girl. And I personally don't think her funeral, after she was brutally beaten and murdered, was the place to highlight all the mistakes she made in her short years on this earth. Perhaps let's focus on the loss that has been suffered here, the tragedy of Reena's murder. If you're desperate to say something bad about someone, let's badmouth the bastards who beat her down and drown her. Remember, this is just my opinion. When it comes to the teens that beat Reena and the two who murdered her, there are studies that suggest that when adrenaline is increased in situations such as the swarming and beating that took place to Reena under the bridge, mob mentality can rule. However, this was a planned beating. These girls had made the conscious decision to coerce Reena to come out that night and to beat her. So maybe the beating went a little too far. Yes, that was probably because of the adrenaline and the teenage hormones mixing together. But at least 6 of those teens had enough of a moral compass to stop and walk away. Unfortunately, 2 did not. I don't just lay blame on the 2 teens that actually murdered Reena for her death. I lay blame on a lot of people. This was a perfect storm that came together to create the conditions for Reena's murder to take place. I blame her parents for not seeing the warning signs that Reena was heading down a bad path, for insisting that Reena follow their faith and their rules because they said so, and not taking the time to explain the world to her, to explain what they wanted for her in her future, for not taking the time to find help for her at the very first signs of her insecurities. I blame the school for not observing what was happening right in front of them, the bullying, the abject cruelty that was being strewn onto Reena. I blame the school for allowing the romanticizing of gangster lifestyles to be allowed within the school. I blame the police for not doing something to help Reena when she made and then rescinded allegations of abuse. I blame the police for not taking those underage teens home when they came and found them at the schoolyard after the broken window. I blame the CAS for also not doing something for Reena when she made the allegations of abuse and sexual assault. The CAS is one of the most broken and over micromanaged systems inside this great country of Canada. And sadly, Reena is not the only child who has been failed or harmed by this agency. This agency needs to be completely leveled and rebuilt if they are ever going to do any good at all. I blame the entertainment industry for romanticizing gangster lifestyles to teenagers, for making it seem like living on the edge of crime is fun, giving record deals and millions of dollars to people like this. The people that the entertainment industry lifts up and celebrates are the role models for our children. Why would they think it's okay to promote a music video where the lead singer is tapping a gun along to the beat of the music, or by illustrating in a music video or song that by asserting dominance over someone, you can gain value and importance among those who also live the life of a gangster. I blame us, you and me, society, for swallowing the standards that celebrity inundates us with every second of every fucking day. You have to be skinny to be beautiful. If you're not a size 0, you're not worth it. You're not trying hard enough, and you won't succeed. If you want to be popular, you have to dress like this, buy this brand, or look like that. We all need to do better, people. Seriously. I feel as though Reena could have blossomed into an amazing woman. She was already beautiful at 14, and I feel as though she would have only increased in beauty as she grew if she hadn't been let down at every turn she made. This was a really tough case for me to do. My emotions may have overtaken some of my ranting near the end, but I appreciate you listening. Thank you for joining me today. If you are being bullied, harassed, or abused in any way, please reach out. There is help out there. This has been a Bitter Witness production.